There was this one famous president. So right after he won the election, he was riding in his car with his wife. So they passed by a gasoline station, so to just fill the tank. And the president noticed that his wife was talking like they know each other so well, the gasoline man. So after he filled the tank, he talked to his wife and said, I noticed when we were in the gasoline station that you were like talking to this gasoline man, and it seems that you know each other. And his wife said, yeah, we went to high school together, and we were actually classmates during college. Oh, and then the president was trying to, and then what happened? Actually, he proposed to me before I met you. And the president felt so good. Now, see, at least you made the right choice. You're married to the president. And the wife said something like this, no, you get it wrong. If I married him, you be the gasoline boy. He's the president. Let us not underestimate the influence of a person. Influence are usually expressed in two ways, directly or indirectly, visible or in a subtle way. Just like in the famous saying that we hear today, behind every successful man is what? A woman. Let us look at a controversial story, the controversial life of a famous woman in the Bible, in the life of two kings. I'm talking about Bathsheba. The controversial life of this woman who played a major and critical role in the life of two kings, the life and rule of David and Solomon. Every time King David is mentioned in the Old Testament or in the Bible, two persons are always associated with him. First, every time David is mentioned, the first thing that comes to your mind is Goliath. Remember? Oh, David, the giant slayer. Maybe the famous story that we heard about Bathsheba is the woman that was taking a bath naked and David saw her. No, the story of Bathsheba is not only about taking a bath. Today, we will see the story of this person, and I would like to give a title to this sermon, Subtle Influence. The life and the story of Bathsheba is really a controversial and interesting story. It all started one night. So I want you to listen very carefully because I'll give you the scenarios. There are 3 episodes in the life of this woman named Bathsheba. It all started one night, 2 Samuel chapter 11. It says here, in the spring of the year, when kings normally go out to war, David, our king, sent Joab, one of his generals, and the Israelites' army to fight the Ammonites. They destroyed the Ammonite army and laid siege to the city of Rabbah. Rabbah is the capital city. However, the writer said, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. David did not join. David was the famous warrior of Israel. David, the hand of God was always with David. That's why he was known as the best warrior, the great warrior of Israel. Now, David did not join. Now, late one afternoon, after his midday siesta, David got out of the bed and was walking on the roof of his palace. The next verse is crucial. As he looked out over the city, he noticed a woman of unusual beauty taking a bath. Now, this is the famous story that we all know. That's why in my theory, it happened not in the evening because it's hard to see someone taking a bath in the evening. In those days, there were no electricity. So probably it happened sometime 5 to 6 o'clock. So that David can still see the unusual beauty of a person. The name is Bathsheba. David got attracted to this woman. So what David did, because he desired the woman, he sent someone to find out who she was. And he was told, sir, that woman that was taking a bath that you saw, he or she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah. Uriah, your best soldier, your best army commander. Oh, yeah. He's the wife. Sabi ni David, okay. So maybe for several months, Uriah is out and the woman is there alone. And you know what David did? David did the unthinkable. David sent messenger again to get her. Take note of this. And when she came to the palace, he slept with her. Can you imagine? David's supposed to be the shepherd of the nation of Israel. David's supposed to be the king to take care of the people of Israel. And here is David exploiting an innocent and a victim or a woman by the name of Bathsheba. Now, there is a parenthesis in the letter, in the writing of the story. Here's the parenthesis of the author, telling us something here that she just had completed, referring to Bathsheba, she just had completed this cycle of menstruation, which means the author is telling us that Bathsheba, she was not pregnant when she slept with David. Because she just finished the menstrual cycle here, and the author is telling us that she's capable of conceiving. The timing, look at the timing. Maybe David was not aware of it. And later, when Bathsheba, after 1 week, 2 weeks, Bathsheba noticed that I'm supposed to have a period today. My period did not come, and my husband is in war. So what's happening with me? And it was delayed for months or weeks or months, and she became very scared. And she sent an SMS to King David. I am delayed. I am pregnant. And the effect on David, you would not imagine the succeeding verses of the impact of this text message from Bathsheba. I'm not going to show the text, but I'm going to tell it to you in my own words. I want you to read it at home. What happens next was unthinkable. Really, really unthinkable. What happens next is unthinkable for a person like David, who was supposed to be an anointed servant of God, worshiper of God, the man after God's own heart. You know what? Because David was not afraid to commit murder by proxy to cover his adultery. The following verse says, David wanted to cover up his mess. So what he did, he called Joab, sent a message to Joab, his general, and said, bring back Uriah to me, the husband, the Hittite. Bring back Uriah, send him back to me here. And Uriah, without knowing anything, oblivious of what's going on, was sent back to King David, and he thought maybe he was asked to report about the progress of the war. And David said, how are you, Uriah? Okay, sir, the battle is going well, and we are sieging the city. Okay, I want you to relax. And David gave him a gift. And the plan A of David, go home, dine, eat, relax, and sleep with your wife. Now, the plan of David is, if Uriah would go home, probably he missed his wife so much for how many months in the battle. If he would go home, he would sleep with Bathsheba, and then something happened, and then he will find out later on that Bathsheba conceived. Then he might think that it is his baby. Then my problem is solved. But the problem here, he did not anticipate that Uriah did not go home that night. He slept there in the palace with the guards. The following day, David woke up. He was thinking, my problem is solved. Only to find out, Uriah did not go home. He slept with the guards, the armies, the soldiers. And David got very mad. Called Uriah, what's wrong with you? I cannot afford to sleep with my wife. My comrades are in battle. How can I sleep? They were sleeping in tents. How can I do that? How can I enjoy my intimacy with my wife? So I could not do that, sir. And David said, go to plan B. Okay, I want you to come tonight. We will have a feast. Serve the best wine. He would make Uriah drink and become drunk, so that when Uriah is drunk, then he will miss his wife and go home and eventually sleep with Bathsheba. So he did the plan B. Only to find out he got drunk, but Uriah did not go home. David said, plan C, Uriah, you come here. He wrote a letter to Joab, to the general, and said, I want you to bring this letter to Joab. Yes, sir. Little did Uriah realize he was carrying his own death sentence. In the letter, it says, David writing to Joab, place Uriah in the front line where is the most dangerous place in war so that he will be killed. And Joab, the general faithful to David, obeyed the instruction, placed Uriah and his best soldiers in front, and the news reached back to David, sir, patay na po si Uriah and all the faithful soldiers. And you know what David said? That's part of the casualties of war. Let's move on. Unthinkable for a person that is called the man after God's own heart. Plan A, plan B, plan C. And this is the next verse. When Uriah's wife heard, I don't know if it was brought, the news was brought by a fellow soldier, she mourned for him. When the period of mourning was over, David sent for her and brought her to the palace, and she became one of his wives. Then she gave birth to a son, but the Lord was displeased of David, what David had done. Now, let's pause for a while, because what happens next is David was not afraid to commit the sins of violating the Ten Commandments. Brothers and sisters, mind us that he did not only kill Uriah, but some of the faithful soldiers were also slain in the war. The Lord was displeased. When I was reading this, account, I was telling to myself, Lord, why are you so quiet? Why are you so quiet from verse 1 until verse 27? That it is not David who had the final say, in the situation. It is God who has the final word. And look at what verse 27. The Lord was displeased with what David had done. Let's pause for a while. I've written some hard questions that I asked this text, and I want to share it with you. My question is, was Bathsheba really an innocent victim? Because we all perceive that Bathsheba was an innocent victim. My question is, did David see her bathing, or Bathsheba caught his attention? Why would Bathsheba take a bath naked in his in his courtyard outside? Why was he taking a bath naked? Was she trying to catch the attention of the king? My question is, was she really an innocent victim? Or did she plan it? Why did she confide with King David that she was pregnant and did not tell her husband? Was she protecting Uriah? Was she protecting her husband's reputation? Or was Bathsheba leveraging on the royal affair? Was she trying to blackmail David? Or was she trying to align and say and have the benefit? Was she an accomplice or trying to be part of the royal family? Could she see the opportunity to be connected to a royal family? This is my chance. I will be part of the family of the king. Was Bathsheba really an innocent victim? Oh, I want you to hold on to your seat before you answer that. Was Bathsheba, as she appears, meek as she appears to be? Was she as naive as she appears to be? You know, the Lord was displeased of what David had done. The next chapter was crucial. The Lord now intervened. Prophet Nathan arrived at the palace, knocked at the door of the palace, and the guard said, "Sir, David, the prophet Nathan is here, wanted to speak to you." You know, in those days, for a prophet to appear and visit you, there are only two things. It's either they will pronounce blessing or they will pronounce judgment to you. So Nathan came and said, "What can I do for you?" David would say. And Nathan said, "I have something to consult with you, king." And David said, "Okay, tell me." And Nathan gave him a parable, a story. Sabi ni Nathan, "Sir, there were two people, there are two men. The first man is very rich. He has a lot of cattle and sheep and animals under. He was taking care. He was very rich. And his neighbor was a poor man who had only one lamb. He loved that lamb so much that lamb would eat on his plate and drink from his cup. That one lamb is like a daughter to him." And then Nathan said, "You know, sir, one day there was a visitor that came to that rich man. And the rich man did not kill one of his sheep or goat, but instead took the lamb of his neighbor, took that one lamb of his poor neighbor." And David got very angry. David said, "That man should be put to death. And that man should pay that poor man 4 lambs in replacement of that lamb." And you know the famous line of Nathan, "Sir, you are the man." It was a story confronting David of his sin. And you read the following verses of chapter 12. Nathan reiterated and said, "This is what the Lord said. I have rescued you. I have chosen you to be the king. I have given you the inheritance, the palace, and everything. I have given you the kingdom. If you needed more, I could have given you more. But you have disrespected my word. But because of your sin, David," read chapter 12. The Lord said through Nathan, "Your family will be divided. Your children will rebel against you." David cried bitterly, and he said, "Lord, I have sinned against you." David said, "I have sinned against Yahweh." And Nathan said, "Okay, David, the Lord has decided you will not die. But this is the consequence." Listen to this. In every sin that we commit, there is forgiveness. That's true. But the consequence we have to face. Sabi na Nathan kay David, "David, God has decided to forgive you. But remember the consequence of your sin. Your child with Bathsheba will die." David fasted and prayed for 7 days, lying on the floor, crying and pleading and trying to bargain with God if God could change his mind. "Lord, don't take the life of my child." On the 7th day, the child died, and his attendants were scared. How could we tell David that the child is dead now? And they were scared and said, "Sir, the child is gone." And David stood up, shaved, took a bath, started to eat, and they were surprised. What are you doing, David?" And he said, "I was trying to bargain with God. But now God has decided finally, how can I bring back that life?" And he submitted himself to God. Now, the next verse tells us, because Bathsheba on the side was just quiet and mourning and grieving, then David comforted Bathsheba. Maybe Bathsheba was crying, this is because of the consequence of what I have done, what you have done, what we have done. David comforted Bathsheba, his wife, and slept with her. Now, this is just a concise, a short, a summary of what happened, but it takes several months and weeks. This verse is a summary. Then she became pregnant again, Bathsheba. And take note of this, and gave birth to a son, and David named him Solomon. Now, the writer is telling us this is how Solomon was born. He's telling us because we may have a misconception that Solomon was the baby that was a product of that sinful relationship. Diba? No. Solomon is the second child. And look at the next verse. The Lord loved the child, Solomon, and sent word through Nathan the prophet again, and told David, you should name him Jedidiah, which means the Lord, beloved of the Lord. Now, this verse tells us that God has forgiven David and welcomed him back and gave his favor again on David. But listen carefully. The forgiveness is one thing, but the consequence is another thing. Even in the consequence of the sin of David, God already said, your children will disrespect you and you will be divided with sword. Totoo yun. Yung anak po ni David, si Absalom, slept with all the wives of David on the rooftop in an open public to disgrace his father. And David could not do anything. This is part of the consequence. David was just crying in his heart. And he cried even more when Absalom died, supposed to be the next heir to the throne. The consequence of what David has done. 30 years later, Solomon was now a grown-up boy, a grown-up man, and David was very, very old. And in this episode, you will notice the highlight of the story of Bathsheba, how she played a subtle influence in the life of this king known as David. 1 Kings chapter 1, King David was very old now. And it says here, no matter how many blankets covered him, he could not keep himself warm. He was old. Nobody is taking care of David. So his advisors told him, let us find a young virgin to wait on you and look after you, my Lord. She will lie in your arms and keep you warm. Because he was the king. He needed some companionship. So what happens now? They did a search in the whole land, looking for a beautiful girl, and they found Abishag from Shunem and brought her to the king. David don't need a companion that beautiful. He just needed a caregiver. He just needed a nurse. The girl was beautiful. She looked after the king and took care of him. But take note of the last line. But the king had no sexual relationship with her. David learned from the terrible mistake of violating a person, an innocent woman. So she kept herself, the woman, pure. Now, a shift of the story. About that time, Adonijah, in the history of David's line, Adonijah is the next in throne. The rightful heir to the throne. He is older than Solomon. So after Absalom, it's Adonijah supposed to be the one who has the right to sit on the throne. Now Adonijah heard about the king was old enough, or was old and very old, and he said maybe he has a lot of advisors, and Adonijah said, I will make myself king. And so he provided himself with chariots and charioteers and recruited 50 men to run in front of him. And he made a celebration about his kingship. He was not even proclaimed yet, and yet he was acting like the king. So there was a celebration. You know what Adonijah did? He went to the priest, the church, the temple, and got the sympathy of the priest. He went to the army, the military, and he got the sympathy of the army and the military. It was a coup d'etat. Remember Prophet Nathan? The one who rebuked David. Nathan came to Bathsheba and said, did you not hear the noise? Adonijah is proclaiming himself as the new king. Now listen carefully if you want to survive. Nathan said to Bathsheba, if you do not act now, when the king died, you will be killed. So listen to my advice. Nathan said to Bathsheba, go to the king, David, and tell him this. Follow my advice, verbatim. Say this to David. Tell David, did you not promise to me, did you not vow to me that my son Solomon will be the next king? Di ba pinangako mo? They made up a story. Nathan said, you say this to David. And when you say it to David, I will come later to confirm everything that you said. Another coup. And Bathsheba said, okay, I will do that. Look what happened. Bathsheba went to David. David was old. Bathsheba bowed down before the king, and the king David said, what can I do for you, mother? And look, She replied, "My Lord, you made a vow. Nangako ka, my Lord. Before the Lord your God, when you said to me, your son Solomon will surely be the next king and will sit on my throne." Mga kapatid, there was no verse prior to that David promised. It was only the words of Nathan who said, ito sabihin mo, verbatim. But when you say this to the king, later on I will come and confirm it. What a conniving situation here, trying to secure the position for the son. But instead, Adonijah proclaimed himself as the king, and you don't even know about it. He has sacrificed many cattle and fattened calves and sheep, and he has invited the king's sons to attend. And he also invited the Abiathar, the priest, and Joab, the commander. See, the army and the church is with him. He did not invite your servant, Solomon, my son. What is Bathsheba trying to do here? Subtle influence. Look at the development of the scenario here. Now, my Lord, the whole Israel is waiting for you to announce who will be the next king, my Lord. And if you do not act, my son and I will be treated as criminal as soon as the Lord, the king, has died. Verse 22, if you read it, I will not show it in the LCD. Verse 22, while she was still speaking, someone knocked at the door. Nathan came. "Sir, David, Nathan the prophet is here." They were trying to rouse the king and influence King David. Call Bathsheba, so she came back and stood before the king. Take note of the next line. And the king repeated this vow for the first time. "As surely as the Lord lives, who has rescued me from all this danger, your son, Solomon, will be the next king and will sit on the throne in this day, for just as I bowed before you, the Lord, the God of Israel." This is the only time David said that vow. And Bathsheba bowed down with her face to the ground, and "May the Lord, King David, lives forevermore." Now, this is my question. If you pause for a while, my question is, did Bathsheba acquire the skill to manipulate her way in the hearts of the king? Or did she possess that skill from the very start? Was she really a passive and innocent as she appears to be? Now, you start to doubt. Was she an accomplice? Was she aware of plan A, plan B, plan C? Or was she taking an opportunity? This is my opportunity to be part of the royal line. Obviously, in this verse, Solomon or Bathsheba has a subtle influence in the life of David. Bathsheba joined David's family, and she is the seventh wife of David, and yet he made her way past the others to be David's favorite. Let us not underestimate the influence of people. You and I were given the ability to influence. Maybe we're not aware of it. Maybe we are doing it directly, or maybe we are doing it in a subtle way, but one way or another, you and I are given the ability to influence. Even Prophet Nathan, who knew the dark secret of her life, allied with her. Because Nathan saw Bathsheba not just a minor player in the kingdom. She saw Bathsheba as a queen mother and a kingmaker. Now, the subtle influence of Bathsheba did not end there. This is the last episode. I want you to hold on to your seats, and you will see the untold story of Bathsheba. The next chapter, 1 Kings chapter 2. David was very old. He called his son Solomon, because after that he already proclaimed Solomon as the king. And Adonijah got scared. He was so scared that he went to the temple and held on to the horn, the altar, and he was saying, begging David or Solomon not to kill him. And Solomon called Adonijah and said, "Okay, I will spare your life." And Solomon was already the king. "I will spare your life," he told Adonijah, "but don't do any foolish thing again, or otherwise I'll kill you." So he let go Adonijah. Now this is the next episode. King David was already old and confirmed the reign of Solomon and gave him the final instruction and charges. Adonijah, remember Adonijah? The one who proclaimed himself as king, the older brother. Adonijah one day knocked at the palace. "Can I speak with Bathsheba?" And Bathsheba said, "Oo. Oy, did you come in peace or you're trying to destroy us again?" Sabi ni Adonijah, "No, I came in peace." And this is what he said. He replied to Bathsheba, said, "As you know, the kingdom was rightfully mine. All Israel wanted me to be the next king, remember? But the tables were turned, and the kingdom went to my brother instead, to your son. For that is the way the Lord wanted it. So now I just want one favor. To ask of you, please don't turn me down." "What is it?" Bathsheba asked. Now, pause for a while. Why would Adonijah approach Bathsheba and not go directly to Solomon? Because he knew how influential Bathsheba, the mother. How subtle the influence of the mom. Can you face the king in my behalf? Look at this. He replied, speak to King Solomon on my behalf, for I know he will do anything you request. Adonijah knew. When I know that he will do anything for you when you request Bathsheba. And Bathsheba said, okay, that's not an issue. I know that from the start. And then asked him to let me marry Abishag. Remember Abishag? The beautiful queen, the little girl, the most beautiful girl who won the beauty pageant to be a caregiver of David. Remember? David is already dead. What is now Abishag is doing? Abishag is not doing anything in the temple. He's just combing her hair and making herself beautiful, not doing anything because Solomon is not sleeping with her. Now Adonijah said, if I cannot get the throne, can I request for that bride? Abishag. Now listen very carefully because this is critical. Bathsheba agreed, okay, that's your request, I will go before the king. So Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak on behalf of Adonijah. The king rose from his throne to meet her and bowed down before her. Take note of this, the king bowed down. When he sat down on the throne, again, the king ordered that a throne be brought for his mother, and he was sitting down. Okay, guys, can you make another throne like this and put it here? Mom, can you please sit down? Can you imagine? Can you imagine the subtle influence of Bathsheba? Whom we thought in the first episode was just quiet, just taking a bath, quietly. No. Let us not underestimate Bathsheba. How she played a subtle influence in the life of David, now in the life of Solomon. Sit at my right hand, Mom. Nathan the prophet was right. She saw in Bathsheba the queen mother and the kingmaker. Wow. And then Bathsheba told Solomon, what is it, Mom? I have a request. Adonijah came to me this afternoon and he's asking for Abishag. Who Abishag? The beautiful girl. And you know the reaction of Solomon? Read it. I don't have it here. Read it at home. Solomon got so angry. He became so angry. Maybe he stood up in his throne and said, what? Adonijah? Again, he did not get the throne and he's asking for Abishag? It's as if he's asking for the whole kingdom. This guy, namumuro na to, si Adonijah. And you know what happened there? Read it. Pinapatay niya si Adonijah. That's it, ma'am. He's trying to secure again. Because when the request of Adonijah, Solomon knew the implication of the request. Adonijah's request to marry Abishag was actually tantamount to getting David's throne. Now my question is this. Hold on to your seats. My question is this. Did Bathsheba see the implication of the request? Why would Bathsheba agreed to come in behalf of Adonijah? Hindi niya ba nampasa? Hindi niya ba na-discern yung inihingi ni Adonijah? Bathsheba knew. Because he knew that as long as Adonijah is alive, the throne of his son Solomon is always a threat. Bathsheba agreed to come. Okay, hinihingi mo yung trono ha? Okay, patay ka. And Bathsheba came before the king. Alam ni Bathsheba the reaction of Solomon will be to put him to death. Bathsheba knew all the while and she would like to seal the fate and all the threats, to eliminate the threats for his son Solomon. And that's the last episode. That's the last time Bathsheba was mentioned. But you know why? Because his role was concluded. Secured ang trono ng kanyang anak na si Solomon. Because the number one threat was finally sealed and put to death. We don't need to be prominent. We don't need to be wealthy. We don't need to be in the position to exert influence in this world. All of us have a way of influencing people in this world. This is the overarching message. Each and every one of us can influence in a subtle way. Some of us, maybe the basic difference between men and women, men would influence very visibly, directly, but women, very subtle and influence ng, lalo na yung mga asawa natin, di ba? Minsan yung pabulong ng, alam mo, love, hindi dapat ganyan eh. Actually, dapat ganito. And little did we know that sometimes we disregard them, but those are wisdom from God. No, each and every one of us has the influence. Let us use it for God's glory and for the good of others. To be subtle in our influence is not wrong. It becomes wrong when the end result is selfish. How are you influencing your friends? How are you influencing your family? How are you influencing your boss, your children, your friends? Listen to these proverbs. I would end here. A Spanish proverb says, a woman's advice is of little value, but he who does not take it is a fool. Most of the time we disregard our wives, the women who gives us advice and wisdom. God has given us wives to complement the wisdom that God has required from us. True enough, in our relationship with my wife, Sister Manju, most of the time you see me stand here. I preach, I teach, but it is not just mine. Sister Manju would always speak, would always relate, would always contribute. It is wise for each and every one of us to listen. Now, for singles and young people, remember this. The overarching principle is all of us has been given and entrusted with the ability to influence. Whether it is visible or subtle, let us submit it to God and unselfishly use it for the good of others and for the glory of God. Use it for the betterment of the others, not for selfish interest. Nagiging mali, nagiging masama yung influence, nagiging bad influence if we do it the wrong way. But influence per se is neither good nor bad. It is how we use it and the end result of it. Amen? Now my challenge for each and every one of us, just like the words of Jesus, is this. You are the salt of the earth. Remember the words of Jesus? He was talking about influence. I place you in this world. Influence the world for my kingdom and for my glory.